The fastest way I've found to improve in StarCraft 2 is to have a plan for each and every one of the games that you play. And what I got for you today is a strategy and a build order for Terran versus Protoss. So Terran versus Protoss, from the Protoss' point of view, generally speaking means that you're gonna try and harass the Terran player as much as you possibly can. Be it with Adepts, be it with Oracles, be it with Dark Templar, or be it with any of that shenanigans, Protoss is usually trying to slow Terran down. Now, I just got done casting this game right here and I wanted to upload it to YouTube, but then I realized, well, it may not be the most exciting game to watch. It is a super clean execution right here by Alive, where he's just basically countering Protoss at each and every turn by simply executing a build order super cleanly. So what we're gonna do is just watch this game entirely from the Terran player's point of view. Of course, I will be taking control of the camera, because he's gonna be glitching all over the screen just to try and be as fast as possible. But the thing is that Alive executes a super straight up and super clean build order in this match that is relatively easy to copy yourself as well. Now, one thing to note, while I do unpause this replay, is that this is not an easy build order. It will require a little bit of practice, but the nice thing is as well that he doesn't really push until roughly 6.5 minutes into the game, and that's really the goal we're going for. The timing that Alive is trying to execute here, while I once again pause, is to hit right when Combat Shield, Stimpack, as well as +1 Infantry Weapons finish up, all the while being safe against all the different kinds of Protoss aggression in the earlier stages of the match. So he starts off very simply. 14 depot right here at the top of the ramp. The reason why, of course, you want to wall off in Terran versus Protoss is to make sure that those pesky adepts cannot just go into your main base and, you know, wreak havoc right there to your SCVs. But really, you can jump into a game quite easily and start practicing this yourself as well. And I think that the best way to learn here is to just simply execute this build over and over and over again before jumping on the ladder and trying it out against an actual opponent. Anyway, so we go for the 14 depot right here. We go into the 15 Refinery and then a 16 Barracks as well. So all the while you're trying to produce as many SCVs as possible. Now the nice thing, and the one thing that I really loved about watching this from Alive, is that he executes the Sim City, like the positioning of the buildings and the switching of the tech labs and the reactors and whatnot. He does that absolutely brilliantly. It looks super pretty as well. I mean, it sort of makes StarCraft 2 feel a little bit like an art form in a way. You'll see what I mean in just a little bit. But he does it so cleanly that it looks absolutely spot on. So he goes for the supply depot. He goes for the Refinery, and then he follows it up with the Barracks. Now, instead of going with a Reaper, he decides to jump into a Marine instead. Now, this Marine here is just to shoo away the scouting probe, because very shortly, Alive will be building another command center here in the in-base expansion on this particular map. Of course, if there wasn't an in-base expansion, you would just go ahead and take it elsewhere. But the use for this Marine is to just simply shoo away the scouting probe that will make its way across the map, and there it already is. So when the Barracks finishes up, he goes for a single Marine. He follows it up with an Orbital Command as well, of course, to get those mules out ASAP. And then he gets himself the second command center in the in-base expansion as soon as he possibly can. So even though he got himself quite a bit of gas already, he's not actually using the gas just yet. And instead, he's prioritizing the economy right there in the form of a command center. Now, while the Marine and the Probe will try and you know, fight each other for a little while, right when the Marine pops out, Alive decides to go for a Reactor here. Very shortly, he will also follow this up with a Factory. So very straightforward thus far, right? So he goes for the supply depot, into a Refinery, into a Barracks. Once the Barracks finishes up, he makes a single Marine and goes for the Orbital Command. Then he follows it up with a second command center and builds the Reactor after the Marine pops out. And shortly after, he goes for the Factory as well. So far, pretty straightforward. You know, basically no shenanigans just yet. And one thing to keep in mind as well is that this Barracks right here, that the first one that we made, right? That one will be continuously throughout this game, just be straight up producing Marines. Nothing will really happen with that one. The real shoveling of the different add-ons and whatnot will happen once the other buildings will finish up here very shortly. So of course, once the first mule drops, he is going to continue that SCV production. We'll bring a other SCV here to the front to build that second supply depot. There we go. And shortly after, he will also be starting up the Refinery here on that Vespian geyser, basically as soon as he can afford it right there. So a little bit later, indeed, the Barracks will finish up, and this one is just going to continuously produce more and more Marines. Now once the factory finishes up, Alive does not hesitate and he immediately drops down a starport as well. So super clean, right? Just making sure that he gets all of those unit producing structures out as soon as possible. Now on top of that, he builds himself 2 Widow Mines. In this particular case, he goes for 2 Widow Mines, and I would advise you to do the same as well. Now Alive here is gonna make a really smooth move where he's gonna put the Widow Mine out in the middle of the map to spot and see the incoming Oracle, but then on top of that kill it as well. We'll see that in just a little bit. If you're not feeling that comfortable, of course, just simply put the Widow Mine in the mineral line, because the reason why we're making this many Marines early on, as well as that Widow Mine, is just to simply shoo away the Oracle. There's pretty much always going to be an Oracle on the way. In Terran versus Protoss is the 100% standard right now, so you gotta make sure that you at least have got a reasonable amount of defense. Now, if for example Depths would have come in, of course, first off, you would have scouted that with the Marine that's been wandering around here for a little bit, trying to look for that probe, but of course you would just simply be capable of getting that supply depot up and running once again, and if there were, you know, simply too many units at this point in the game, he would switch over to a, for example, a bunker right over there or so to prevent his opponent from really doing any real damage. And just by simply walling off, you can buy yourself a lot of time. Now notice here, Alive has not scouted whatsoever, so that does mean that he's feeling confident enough in his build that it's gonna stop every single bit of aggression. Now, like I said, right after the factory finishes up, he goes for 2 Widow Mines and he immediately jumps into the starport as well. Now, of course, once this second command center finishes, once again, he's going to go for that immediate orbital command so he can start dropping mules. Once again, mules are absolutely incredible. Absolutely, you know, insane. So there we go. Second command center finishes up. As soon as he realizes it, he will also go for that orbital command, and shortly he will be dropping down 2 different mules. Now here's the cute little move, and I'll speed this up for just a little bit, just so we can admire this, you know, really sweet play. This is something that the highest level Terran players have been doing for a while. Basically, once maps go into the map pool for a extended period of time, what will happen is that Protoss players will send their Oracle across the map, right? And normally they don't really take control of the Oracle again until it arrives roughly over here or so, and they just simply rally it across. Now, just from simply playing this game a ton, Alive knows exactly where his opponent's Oracle is going to be located where at a very specific timing if his opponent is a high level as well. And if you have a quick look right here, the Oracle is literally right outside of that circle, right when the Widow Mine burrows. I mean, that's a super high level move. I can't expect anyone to go ahead and do this very easily, but normally, right, this would not be able to really do that much damage. So I would advise, if you're not feeling as confident as Alive, to just go ahead and put that Widow Mine in the middle of your mineral line to make sure that you can shoo away the Oracle and at the very least prevent it from roasting all too many SCVs. So far we got the following. He went for the supply depot, into a refinery, into a barracks. Once the barracks finishes up, he goes for the orbital command, he follows it up with a single marine, and he then also builds the second command center right here in the in-base expansion. Shortly after the first marine finishes up, he goes ahead and builds a reactor on the barracks and follows it up with a factory. The factory will then go ahead and start producing non-stop Widow Mines, at the very least 2 of them for the time being, and will shortly be creating a bunch more, but he will be making a bunch of these Widow Mines. And right after finishing up the factory, besides making the 2 Widow Mines, he also adds on the starport. Now in the middle of it, of course, he is still adding on additional supply depots, but so far it's been pretty straightforward. He got that depot started right after getting the factory going as well, and then he built that second refinery in the main base. As soon as the orbital command in the natural finishes up, he will be dropping mules with that, and he built that orbital right when the command center got built by that single SCV. So very clean game thus far. So far into this game, all of the decisions that Alive has made are just there for safety. He's gone for the 1-1-1 build, the barracks, the factory, as well as a single starport right there. But really the goal here is to try and stay safe and make sure that he can continuously keep on mining off of that second command center, right? So this right here should be your bread and butter. This should be your go-to style whenever you are indeed playing Terran versus Protoss. Because once again, note, Alive has done absolutely 0 scouting. That means he's feeling confident to execute this against every single Protoss player on the planet. Well, at the very least, most of them. Maybe some that play a little bit more aggressive may be an issue, but if you are a ladder player, like mostly myself as well, you are going to be capable of pulling this off. Now, right at this point, this is where the transition towards the +1 attack on the infantry units, as well as the Stimpack and the combat shield, really starts rolling out. So initially he still builds that Viking, right, in that starport, but shortly after sniping, you know, of course, the unit in the middle of the map, the Oracle, he will start the transition towards other units. So the first thing to keep in mind is that he goes for the double barracks follow-up. So he built a single barracks initially, and shortly after, as soon as he can afford it while continuously building SCVs, he goes for the second barracks right there behind the 2 buildings that he already put up. Now, after this factory finishes up that second Widow Mine, as well as that Starport finishes up the Viking normally, he builds 2 tech labs on both of these. And you may have already guessed it, those are both going to be switched over with those 2 barracks very, very shortly. So both the factory as well as the Starport, normally I would advise making a single Viking, and I guess for the factory it goes with the double Widow Mine, but both of those buildings will be producing a tech lab shortly after. After that, after starting up all of these 4 structures, right, if we consider the tech lab structures as well, he also begins the engineering bay. So double barracks, double tech lab, and then a single engineering bay as well. Now, right after these finish up, he will be switching those over with the 2 barracks. So he's gonna lift up the factory and the starport once again, and this is why it looks so very pretty to me. Keep in mind though, he's still continuously producing more and more of those marines, but as soon as he realizes that they finish up, he's gonna switch them over and build 2 reactors on them instead. So these barracks will be switched over with the tech labs. The starport and the factory that initially built the tech labs are then gonna be producing reactors here as well. Now, as soon as that engineering bay finishes up, he's going to be starting up the +1 infantry weapons upgrade. As soon as the barracks finish up, he's going to switch them over. And he's going to, of course, prioritize the Stimpack research since it is a little bit of a longer timing right there. So notice, this is like extra bonus points for Alive just because he's freaking good at the game. He started up that second barracks a little bit later, so he didn't need to cut another SCV. Just so he knows that these will roughly finish up around the same time. So he's going to switch those over and start the combat shield up in the second one. So this setup right here, the one where he's getting the +1 attack in the engineering bay, as well as the Stimpack, as well as the combat shield, allow him to push with a huge amount of units really early on into the match. So this is allowing him to set up for a timing attack, like I said, at right around 6 minutes and 20 seconds, with roughly 90 plus supply worth of very powerful units. So notice at this point in the game, Alive has done very little scouting. He sent the first Widow Mine that was buried in the middle of the map across just to see that that third base went down at a pretty standard and pretty early timing, I suppose, here for the Protoss, but you should expect this timing as well at the higher levels of play, but regardless, you know, he scouted that indeed that third base goes down, and he is set up for this great timing attack, and he's really not worrying about anything all too much. So he's not adding on any additional refineries here for the time being. He's just simply adding on more and more supply depots, and he's gonna start producing a lot of units. So notice, he's producing 4 marines at a time. He's gonna be capable of producing 2 Widow Mines here at a time, as well as 2 Medivacs. So he's just simply gonna produce a massive army here to push with right when all of these upgrades finish up. Now, if he can afford it, he will be adding on a couple of Marauders here as well. I've tried finding patterns in different games on whether or not he's making those on purpose. It seems like whenever he can and he's got the resources for it, after starting up those 2 Medivacs here, as well as the 2 Widow Mines, he's just adding on a couple of, you know, he's basically prioritizing Marauders, but if you can't afford them, he's just making Marines out of those barracks instead, just to make sure that he can continuously keep on going. Now, upon scouting that second Oracle, he did end up creating a second missile turret, but please notice here as well, he's not moving with a large chunk of his army across the map. These are just here to sort of try and intercept this Oracle once again to make sure that it doesn't deal a whole lot of damage, but he's really just playing this super safe, right? Making sure that he can, you know, make, you know, exact calculations of where his opponent's army is going to be located so he can push out across the map at a really reasonable time. So notice here, beautiful little move once again. The Marines will be able to intercept that second Oracle as well. Now, of course, once again, the Oracle interceptions here that Alive has been going for are absolutely spot on, and those are high-level moves. They are not to be expected if you are anywhere lower than, you know, the top of Grandmaster on the ladder right now. But still, you know, you can imagine that with a little bit of practice, because so far, I mean, the pressure that Alive has been under, you should be able to execute this as well. And this is the timing right here, right around 5 minutes and 45-ish seconds where he starts moving across the map, but granted, really the timing that he's moving out at is roughly when all of these upgrades are just about a half minute or so from finishing, so it can push at a really good timing. So this is the moment where Alive moves across the map, and I'll speed it up a little bit so you can see exactly what happens. He's still continuously producing more and more units. There we go. The units arrive on the other end of the map. Notice the timing here that he's pushing at. Right when he's moving into his opponent's third base, 2 photon cannons finish up, but more importantly, his combat shield already finished, his +1 attack already finished, and he also is just about a second here from finishing the Stimpack research, and that's exactly the point where he starts pushing very, very aggressively. And believe it or not, even though Mana is a super high level player, just simply sniping those 2 oracles in the earlier part of the game allows him enough army to clean up the entirety of the Protoss base. So, very straightforward play. Now, you can execute this as well, okay? And what I'll go ahead and do is put a full overview of the exact build order down below in the description of the video. But you can imagine, everything up to like the 6.5 minute mark is something that you can execute as well. Just simply jump into a custom game, practice this against an opponent or you know, a computer or against no one for a while until you get this build order nailed down. So what you're looking for is to push at 6.5 minutes, a little bit earlier ideally, with 90+ supply. It's super good, it's super powerful, very straightforward, and it will be able to do a lot of damage. And it's certainly what I'm going to be doing in the majority of my Terran versus Protosses. Now, there's one more thing to note. What exactly is the follow-up? So say, for example, Alive would not be killing his opponent here. Now notice here, once again, I think you can execute this, you know, these first 6.5 minutes perfectly, and you can probably win the vast majority of your games. If you do this well, you should be picking up, like if you're anywhere below like Master League, you can probably win every single Terran versus Protoss just by executing this crispy and getting exactly 90+ supply at 6 minutes, 25-ish seconds. If you manage to execute that, I can't really imagine your opponents below Master League are really gonna have, you know, an answer to this kind of build. But regardless, of course, there's also going to be a follow-up. So this right here is what Alive is following up this build with. So notice while he's moving across the map with his infantry army, he's building up that 3rd command center right outside of his main base. The next follow-up will be 2 additional refineries here as well. So notice this is while his army is moving across, right? He goes for 2 additional refineries. Come on now, get him alive. There you go, he goes for 2 additional refineries. Right when the +1 infantry weapons finishes up, he also adds on the +1 armor here for his bio infantry, for his bio army, which is very, very powerful. There we go. Come on. You got it. You got it. So he's obviously busy here on the other end of the map, but there we go. He will be able to start this up here in just a second. There we go, finally. And then he also adds on 2 additional barracks. So the follow-up while he's moving out is to first off continuously keep on producing more army, but he goes for that 3rd command center, he goes for the double refinery, he goes for the +1 armor, and then 2 more barracks as well to close out even more production and even more unit producing structures. And this is all going on while he's moving across, so by no stretch of the imagination is this a all-in. Now, say for example, right, your opponent is not sitting on a 3rd base and you're fighting up a ramp, right? Say for example, this 3rd base would not have been there. There is no way that Alive would have tried to push up this ramp. You don't want to, you know, you don't want to make stupid decisions. Just because you're trying to hit a timing attack as crispy as possible, and I really want you to, like, I really want to emphasize that point, you need to make sure you get to the other end of the map at 6.5 minutes, otherwise this is completely pointless. But regardless, while you're trying to execute a crisp timing, please keep in mind that moving up a ramp like this is risky business, and if there wasn't a natural down or a 3rd nexus down here for the Protoss player, there's no way Alive would have done that, and instead he would have just sat back on that 3rd command center instead, and he would have just, you know, made sure that he's got a lot of stuff out instead. But still, this should be something, right, that pretty much everyone can execute. It's gonna take a bunch of practice, right? Once again, this is not an easy build. This is not something you're gonna be able to do in your very first attempt. But if you practice this for a couple of hours and you do the build order over and over and over and over again, and once again, I'll link it down below or I'll post it down below in the description of the video, you should be in a great position to win the vast majority of your Terran versus Protoss matches. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button down below, and if you want to see more, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get a notification as soon as the next videos go live. Other than that, I want to thank you very much so for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, alright? And I'll see you in the next one.